We are back for day 4 of the Zachary Hughes murder trial. We missed some of this morning. I'm going to go ahead and have us catch up. There's been breaks. I think even when I just put it on and was in real time, they're on a big break. So we should catch up pretty fast. I believe there's more police officers that are going to be taking the stand. I'm going to go ahead and move myself over because I got that ready to go. Happy Valentine's Day if you're watching this live. Today, both of my daughters don't have school, and they don't have school on Monday. So they may interrupt at times. We'll find out. My oldest, as some of you have seen, will hop in the chat and talk to you sometimes. So that could happen too. All right, let's get this going. Also, if you couldn't tell, I was rushed. My hair is still drying from my shower, but I'm on and ready to go. That's their sound not on, so they'll turn it on in just a second.
I think I made this work. Good morning, Investigator. Good morning. I want to ask you a few questions about the incident date first. So, we talked about the incident date was October the 13th, 2021, correct?
Yes, sir.
And it was a Wednesday?
Yes, sir.
Is that right? So this was a school day.
It was?
Aida was actually, in fact, at school on that day.
Yes, sir.
And her school was Buena Vista, isn't it?
Correct.
And that's very close to the residence.
It is, yes, sir.
How far would you say? You have any idea?
If you were driving, it would probably take a minute or two to get there.
Okay, and we know that Aida used to walk to school.
Yes, sir.
And so law enforcement showed up at the incident location about 11 o'clock, so Aida was scheduled to be home in a few hours after that, one would say, or mid-afternoon, correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, you mentioned you had somewhat of a familiarity with that residence because of an earlier investigation, something about harassment and or stalking. Now, you know that no convictions came out of those allegations, right?
Correct.
Your interview with Bradley Post was on October the 19th, 2021, right?
Yes, sir.
And that was at the Law Enforcement Center?
It was.
Did you speak to him on October 13th of 2021 at Canebrake?
I did not speak with him the day of the incident, no, sir.
Okay. Had you met him prior to October the 13th of 2021?
No, sir.
No, sir.
No,
You
sir.
said no? Okay. Was Bradley Post interviewed on the 13th?
He was.
And we've been providing an interview that he did with the coroner's office, and I think Tracy King was present. Is that the interview?
I don't believe it was Tracy King. I believe it was a member of the coroner's office, and it was another investigator. I don't believe it was Investigator King.
Okay, different investigator then. But it was the coroner who did the interview on that day?
He was involved in the interview. He was in there with an investigator, yes, sir.
Have you watched the interview?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you're aware that the coroner really did most, probably 90% of the questioning?
Yes, sir. He asked a lot of questions, yes, sir.
Now, the coroner is not employed by the Greenville County Sheriff's Office, is he?
He's not.
That's a separate office.
Yes.
The coroners are not tasked with investigating a potential crime, are they?
That's not their primary, no, sir.
So the primary concern is determine cause and manner of death and provide necessary information to family members and things like that?
Yes, sir. To locate a next of kin. Yes, sir.
So Bradley Post was a suspect on that day, right? Just like anybody who would be a close fiance or spouse or something like that. That's just a natural suspect.
He was someone that we definitely wanted to talk to.
Okay. But he wasn't interviewed by Greenville County Sheriff's Office investigator on that date, was he?
Not by anyone from the homicide unit, no, sir.
And the buccal swab was collected from him on what date?
I believe it was that day, the 13th.
And was Lieutenant Parcell's phone taken on that date?
No, sir.
When was Lieutenant Parcell's phone taken?
It was not.
It was not taken.
No, sir.
A buccal swab was taken from her, though, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that was on October the 15th of 2021?
Yes, sir. The 15th.
And what was the reason then for taking the buccal swab?
So we could have something to compare and to, I'm trying to think of the word, exclusions. Obviously, obviously Miss Tina lived there, so we knew that her DNA was going to be all over things in the house.
Okay. And so the buccal swab was taken October 15th, 2021 at the Canebrake house?
No, sir. When I met with Tina to get her buccal swab, it was not at the Canebrake house.
Where was it?
It was at a friend's house.
Okay. But you did meet with her and Bradley Post on October the 15th at the Canebrake house, didn't you?
I did, yes, sir.
Okay. Now, Bradley Post's phone was not collected by law enforcement on October 13th of 2021. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And are you aware now from your investigation, by looking at the body cameras of other officers, that he was deleting photographs from his phone while waiting for law enforcement to arrive?
I'm not aware of that, no, sir.
Yeah. Did you watch all the body cameras?
Oh, I believe I did.
Okay, so just really quickly, we talked about this trial, but if you weren't with us the other day, I'm going to really quick recap because I thought there was supposed to be a whole bunch of things that were left out of this trial, and it has not been left out yet. So I don't know if it's supposed to be left out at a certain point, but currently, so they're talking about getting DNA swabs. They're talking about Tina's right now. Bradley Post was Christina Parcell's boyfriend. Christina and Bradley, this has been, 2020 and then 2021. There was an incident that went on where those two that were a couple at the time, they had been taking pictures of minors, like mostly nude, maybe all nude. They were questioning whether they're selling those photos to people. And they both were getting sued. And with them getting sued, Bradley also was arrested for this, and Christina had died. So right now, her estate is getting sued. So if and when they win, any money that she had saved, anything of that nature would be going to paying the victims. But that really wasn't supposed to get brought up that much in this court. The whole first day of this trial, which really wasn't even like a first day, was them arguing over leaving out all of that information because it doesn't have, has nothing to do with the murder. They think Zachary Hughes killed her because her ex-husband or boyfriend, they were having a really bad custody fight over their daughter. And they think that Zachary, who is best friends with her ex, did that to help him. So it's two different cases, and yet they're starting to get merged. And they weren't supposed to, but evidently they are. So if you hear things of that nature with Bradley Post, that's what's happening, is it's two different cases.
So you don't remember that him saying that?
I don't recall that, no, sir.
But he certainly had the phone from the incident date until October the 19th of 2021, and had every opportunity to delete, manipulate his phone in any way. To keep the case, right?
I know that he had possession of his phone until the 19th, yes, sir.
Okay, now, on October the 15th of 2021, you spoke with Bradley Post at the Canebrake residence,
Yes, sir.
and you mentioned Christina Parcell was also there.
Yes, sir.
And you spoke to Bradley Post on that day?
I did.
Was your conversation with him recorded?
I don't believe it was, no, sir.
And at that time, Bradley Post asked you whether Ms. Parcells had been wearing her engagement ring, right?
He had brought it up, yes, sir.
Okay, so
He had asked about the ring.
I'm sorry.
He asked about the ring, yes, sir.
Okay, so presumably he didn't. If he had to ask you if she was wearing it, he didn't know.
Correct.
Okay. And he asked for the ring back.
I don't remember if he asked for the ring back. I know that he just wanted to know if she had it, if she was currently wearing it.
And he told you at that time about the clone that he had of Christina Parcell's phone, did he not?
I don't know if he told me about it then, but I know he told me about it on the 19th when I interviewed him at the Law Enforcement Center.
Okay. And would you, just to refresh your memory, and I'm going to hand you what's been marked as Defense Exhibit number 60 for identification purposes only. Can
Yes,
you
sir.
recognize what is in, what the contents of that?
Yes, sir. This is one of my supplemental reports.
Okay, and actually, if you look through, it's actually, I believe, all of your supplemental reports.
Yes, sir. It looks to be, yes, sir.
Okay, and if you could you look at your entry on October the 15th, see if there's anything there that refreshes your memory about whether or not he told you about the clone phone on October the 15th?
They also were saying yesterday that her pictures, some like half nude and in these positions, she had them on an escort website, and they haven't told us whether that was 100%
Okay.
her,
Yes, sir. He did.
or if her ex did it.
Was that the first you had heard about this clone phone?
Yes, sir.
Did you seize it on October the 15th?
I did not.
Did you ever seize it?
I seized it on the 19th.
Okay. Now, your investigation also led you to Foothills Veterinarian on October the 18th of 2021, correct?
Yes, sir.
And on that date, you spoke with someone, or you spoke with people at the at this facility where Ms. Parcell had worked? Is that
Correct.
right?
Yes, sir.
And is that where you learned that she had been working part-time?
Yes, sir.
And that she had not worked in some 3 weeks since September the 23rd, 2021.
Yes, sir.
Let me ask you some questions about the October 19th interview with Mr. Post. Where did that interview take place?
At the Law Enforcement Center in our interview room.
Okay. There was another investigator in the room with you?
Yes, sir. That was when Investigator King was in there with me.
And did you seize Mr. Post's phone at that time?
Yes, sir.
And that's the phone that we could see when you're watching the recording of that, the phone that he has out on the table in front of him?
Yes, sir.
When did you take the phone from him?
During that interview.
Was it at the end after the camera was taken off?
Yes, sir. It was near the end of the interview. Yes, sir.
Okay, and you also followed him to his car and took possession of the clone phone, correct?
I did.
So he knew to bring it with him on that day, or had you asked him to bring it with him, or how did it happen to be in his possession? Do you remember?
I don't remember if on the 15th when he told me about it, I asked him to bring it or not, or if he just brought it on his own, assuming I may would like to look at it.
Okay. But that was the phone then that mirrored everything that was being done on Ms. Parcell's phone, correct?
Yes, sir.
And prior to your meeting with Bradley Post, you did get search warrants for his phone, for the cloned phone, and also for a laptop that he had of Parcell's in his possession, right?
Yes, sir.
And then you gave Post's phone and these items to someone else with the Greenville County Sheriff's Office?
I did.
And that was Charlie Cunningham?
Yes, sir.
While those phones were being extracted, was Post allowed to leave the Sheriff's Office?
Yes, sir. He left.
And he went to his home?
Yes, sir. That's where the laptop was.
And the officers went and got that from?
His attorney came with him, and he went inside, grabbed the laptop, and brought it back out to me. That's all. That's the only thing I needed from the house.
Now, there's been testimony in the case that on October the 19th of 2021, Aida Mello was taken into emergency protective custody. Is that correct?
I believe so. Yes, sir.
Did you participate in that?
No, sir.
Were other officers with Greenville County Sheriff's Office participating in that?
Not that I know of.
So it wasn't the Sheriff's Office who did that?
The EPC, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what officers did it.
Okay, but it was, it was the Sheriff's Office, right? Wasn't Dan Bevel the one who was leading that investigation?
I know he was leading an investigation. Yes, sir.
So you weren't consulted about that prior to them going out there?
I remember being told that she was being EPC, placed in emergency protective custody.
Now, we heard testimony yesterday from, maybe been the day before, I don't remember, but from a man named Michael Manigault, or Manigault, I'm not sure how it's pronounced. How did you come across his name?
From Investigator Bevel.
Now, you had an interview with Lieutenant Parcell on October the 13th of 2021,
I did.
and that was recorded, correct?
Yes, sir.
And as lead investigator of the case, obviously you're just trying to get all the information, so you asked some very broad and open questions to try to find out as much as you could, correct?
That's correct.
And one of the questions you asked at the 20-minute mark of the interview, you asked Ms. Parcell about where everybody stayed in the house. And is it true that she told you that Aida's room was being used as a playroom and that she slept in Christina's bed?
I don't specifically recall that, but obviously I recorded the interview, so if that's what it states, then that'd be correct.
And do you recall that at the 23:45 mark, she told you that Bradley Post was at the house every day?
Objection is hearsay, Your Honor.
It's just asking about the two things. First, prior inconsistent statement, and also it just goes to...
It's a prior inconsistent statement of Tina Parcell, not
Yes.
now.
Tina Parcell.
Yeah.
I'm not sustaining the objection.
Now, you've already testified that you spent a great deal of time on October 13th, or that the Sheriff's Office spent a great deal of time canvassing the neighborhood to learn if anyone had cameras or if anyone had seen anyone suspicious. Isn't that right?
Yes, sir.
Did you handle any of that, or was that up to the uniform officers and other officers to handle?
It was mostly other investigators. Yes, sir.
And obviously, this was very important, correct? Because at this time, you didn't have you didn't know who had done this, so you're trying to gather all the information that you can.
That's right.
And so officers would be looking for information, whether anyone had seen someone suspicious or knew the neighborhood, and whether they could identify that person.
Yes, sir.
And if an officer had found someone in that position, they, as lead investigator, you would have been informed about that, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you would have done a follow-up interview with that person?
If someone had come to me and said that someone needs to be spoken to, is that?
Well, if an officer came to you and said, listen, we have somebody at, 105 Canebrake who says they saw a person's face and thinks they could identify that person, you would have been
I would have.
notified of that.
Yes, sir.
And as you develop suspects, you would have gone to that person with a photo lineup to see if they could identify the suspect?
Yes, sir.
And that never happened, did it?
It did not.
So you never went to anyone in Canebrake with a lineup, including Brad Post or Alex Fields or Zach Hughes, isn't that correct?
That's correct.
And that's because no one had ever said that they had seen a face of the person on the bicycle.
Yes, sir.
So what led you all to go to Donna Gorman's house in October of 2024, over 3 years after the incident?
We went there because as we were reviewing the case, preparing for this, we had realized that no one had ever shown her a picture of a bicycle. So we wanted to take that picture up there and let her see it and ask her if that's who she remembers seeing.
And she had been spoken to on October the 13th, had she not?
Yes, sir.
Riley Stokes?
Yes, sir. It was Investigator Stokes.
And Riley Stokes never came to you and said, listen, we found somebody who can identify the person on the bicycle, right?
That's correct.
And so when you went, well, let me ask you this. During those 3 years, between October of 2021 and October of 2024, Zach Hughes' picture had been shown on the news and the newspaper and other places, social media, numerous times. Isn't that right?
Yes, sir.
And in that picture that's shown in the media, he looks quite similar to how he looks now, right? With a full head of hair and a beard.
I believe so. Yes, sir.
In October 13th of 2021, Zach didn't even have facial hair, did he?
I don't remember if he had facial hair.
Do you remember seeing the trail camera photos?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So that was 2 days before, and then you saw Zach Hughes a couple days, well, about a week later at his house, right?
Yes, sir.
And he was clean shaven on that day?
I believe he was. Yes.
In October 28th of 2024, is that when Ms. Gorman said she saw the face of the person on the bicycle?
Yes, sir.
Did she tell you she could identify the guy on the bike?
Sir?
That time, in October 24, she told you she saw the face of the guy on the bike. Did she tell you that she could identify the person?
She said that she believed she would know him if she saw him again.
Really? You didn't put that in your report, did you?
I may not have, no, sir.
I'm sorry?
I don't believe I did.
And you can, I mean, feel free, your report's in front of you, but.
No, sir. I didn't put that in there.
And you would agree that identification of a person in a case like that is very significant, is it not?
Yes, sir.
Did you show her a photo lineup?
I did not.
You did mark in your report that she told you that she would not be able, or she would be able to say it was not Bradley Post on the bike, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now your theory is that Zach drove the morning of October 13th from the Mountain House, which we've heard testimony is about an hour away from Canebrake. And in the summary that you provided, you say that he turned his phone off so he couldn't be tracked at 7:45. So if Zach Hughes left the house at 7:45, there's no way that Zach Hughes could have been there at 8 to 8:15 to be seen by Ms. Gorman, is there?
No, I didn't say that he turned his phone off. There's no activity on his phone.
Okay, no activity. Okay. How many ring cameras and surveillance cameras do y'all have that showed the guy in the bicycle?
From specific locations, I know that we have 3.
Okay.
And there was, one of the locations has multiple cameras.
Okay. And the guy on the bicycle is not picked up by any cameras at 8 or 8:15, is he?
No, sir.
And that is a good hour to hour and 15 minutes before the person is seen entering Canebrake, right? The 122 Canebrake?
Yes, sir.
How close is Miss Gorman's home to 122 Canebrake?
It's fairly close.
Like,
Across the street and over a couple
so
houses.
on a bike, would it be less than a 5-minute ride, would you say?
From Miss Gorman's house to 122? Yes, sir.
Okay. And the person on the bicycle was not wearing a hoodie, was he?
It didn't appear that there was a hoodie.
On November the 9th of 2021, you met with Tina Parcell for the purpose of collecting some items from her that she had found at the Canebrake residence. Isn't that right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. And one of those items was a blue USB thumb drive that she had found in Christina Parcell's room. Is that right?
I don't remember where she said she found it, but I believe she did bring me a thumb drive.
Did y'all examine that thumb drive?
Yes, sir.
Did you yourself or did other officers? Do you know?
I believe I did it.
I want to ask you a few questions related to the harassment investigation. And so you're aware that one of the documents in the packages that were mailed was an advertisement for an escort site, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you are aware that Christina Parcell did have a past that...
Objection, Your Honor. Sustained.
Your Honor, this was brought up by the state. They're the ones who introduced this evidence, and they're...
I'm assuming that's the jury that had to leave.
Yes, sir. Okay, thank you. All right, objection from the state. Your Honor, what is brought up by the state is that they were mailed a photo which has an alleged...
They just turned all the mics off. Oh no! Well, we don't get to hear the argument, but boy, did that attorney get so mad just now. And that's kind of what I'm saying, that there was a whole day that there was an argument back and forth for all of these things. And I'm surprised because there are a lot of things that they are talking about that I thought that they said no. But man, that attorney is going to fight for what he wants to get in just now. So let me see if I can skip ahead. They are going to talk about what I just said about Christina being a wow, this is a long break. About her being a possible escort. They were kind of leaving the door open yesterday, and the fact that, well, was it really her doing that? And so, it's fine. Or was her ex-boyfriend putting this stuff up and making a fake account to harass her? But it sounds like no, that it was her.
Okay. Thank you. I may please the court. Investigator Sparkman, I just want to finish up with asking you a couple of questions about the WhatsApp messages that you testified about at great length yesterday. And you testified about how you collected and put into a binder all of the WhatsApp messages between Zachary Hughes and John Mello. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And you said it was a rather large binder of text messages once you got those all.
It was a lot of messages, yes.
Isn't
It's
it true
it's
that
important to
overwhelming
note
majority of
that
those
clearly
messages come after
clearly this attorney lost that battle because they came back and he is not even bringing up what he was before. So that for now is being left out.
After the middle of April, when Ida Mello was taken away from John Mello and returned to the States to be with his mother.
I don't know if the majority of them or not. I'd have to look at the book again to refresh my memory on the dates.
Okay. And you talked a lot about interpretations, about different messages and what you believe they meant. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And I would like to show you one of the messages on State's Exhibit number 186. And are you? Okay. All right, are you able to read that?
I could read that, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So this is, again, State's Exhibit 186, and I just want to point your attention to the one that's the second message on the left on that page. And I'm not going to ask you to try to decipher everything about that, but in that message, we see, on the first line, we see the name Ida, correct?
Yes, sir.
And then at the end of that line, you see the word doomed. Isn't that right?
Yes.
So one interpretation of that message could be, and do you remember the date of that?
Could you please place it back up there? The 13th, October 13th.
And one interpretation of that message could be that John Mello believed that his daughter, now being returned to the States to live with Christina Parcell, meant that she is doomed.
I think there's way too many words in there for me to say that. I will agree that those two words are in there.
Thank you. No further questions.
All right, any redirect from the stay?
Yes, Your Honor.
A couple questions.
Mr. Moore asked you about the coroner's assistance in this particular case.
Yes, sir.
Do they respond to all homicide investigations?
They do.
And sometimes do they assist y'all in various duties?
They do.
And don't they have their independent investigative authority under statute as well?
Yes.
Now, Mr. Moore discussed the clone phone that Brad Post had. All right, so explain to this jury Christina Parcell's phones that she had.
So the one we refer to as the clone phone, that's a phone that Mr. Post kept that he basically signed into her Apple, using her Apple ID and password when he says cloned. So everything that she does on that phone is not cloned. So he'd be able to see the stuff typically that Apple backs up. Like if you restored your phone from iCloud, emails, contacts, certain text messages and phone calls. That's how that phone was set up.
And he also had Life 360 on her as well.
Yes, he had the Life 360 app, and she was a part of his group. They could see each other's locations.
And did you review the downloads of the phones of Christina Parcell?
Yes, sir.
And you reviewed all of them?
Yes, sir.
All right. And in any of those phones, is there any communication with Zach Hughes?
No, sir.
Is there any email, text message, WhatsApp, Signal, whatever, any kind of application that you saw, any conversations with
No,
anything
sir.
related to Zach Hughes?
No, sir.
All right. They asked you about Donna Gorman.
Yes.
And so when did Riley Stokes speak to Donna Gorman?
I believe it was the day of the incident, the 13th.
And at that time, had y'all located, or did y'all have possession of the photos of a suspect leaving on a bicycle the Cambridge neighborhood?
We knew of the footage, but we weren't able to get possession of that until the following day.
And then Master Deputy Wolf testified that he went back on the 19th and spoke to her.
Yes.
And you recall what his testimony was? Are you aware that he showed her a photo of a bike?
I don't recall if he showed her a photo of the bike or not. I don't believe so.
Okay. And so, and then 3 years later, are you working with the solicitor's office on preparing this case?
I am.
And did you make a decision that you needed to talk to Donna Gorman?
Yes.
And when you went out there and talked to her, did you take down what she told you in a report?
Yes, sir.
And did you show her a copy of the individual on a bike?
Yes, sir.
Did you ever show her any photos of Zach Hughes?
I did not.
They asked you about the timeline on Zach Hughes' phone, and they said from 7:42 to 11:34, there was no activity on the phone.
That's right.
But you know that at 7:42, he unlocks and plugs the phone.
Yes, sir.
Now, can he do that in his car?
He can.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, the angry cross.
Just a few follow-up questions. What is Life 360?
Life 360 is an application that you can download on your smartphone, and you can invite people to join your circle. You see each other's locations.
So it's just sharing your location with other persons?
Yes.
Is there anything else significant to that? I'm just not aware of Life 360, so I just...
That's the extent of what I know about it, just
Okay.
locations.
So there's no way to share information, texts, file sharing, anything like that through Life 360, is there?
Not that I'm aware of.
So the cloned phone, again, that you talked about, the way that was cloned was just through sharing Apple IDs, right?
Yes, sir.
And Bradley Post wouldn't give you that Apple ID, would it?
He didn't initially.
So you said Investigator Wolf went back and spoke to Donna Gorman also?
Yes, sir.
When was that?
I don't remember the exact date, but it was a few days after Investigator Stokes.
Okay, so before you met with Brad Post on the 19th, you think?
I don't recall. It was close to that time.
Within a week or so of the incident?
Yes, I'd say that it's...
So neither Riley Stokes nor Investigator Wolf came back and said, we have a person here who says they saw the face of the person on the bike and thinks they can identify.
That's right.
So nobody ever went out there, because she never told you she could, to show her a photo lineup, right?
That's right.
Nothing further. Thank you.
Any reread? Correct.
No, Your Honor.
Okay, you may step down. Thank you, sir.
Your Honor, the state would call Dr. Claire Rose.
Please place your, please place your left hand on the Bible. Raise your right hand. Do solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name for the record.
My name is Claire Rose, C-L-A-R-E, C-L-A-R-E, and the last name spelled R-O-S-E.
Dr. Rose, good morning.
Morning.
Can I actually just scoot up just a little
Oh,
bit?
I'm sorry.
Can you pull the microphone a little bit closer just so the jury can hear you? Thank you. Dr. Rose, could you tell the jury where you're employed and what you do for them
Sure.
currently?
So I'm currently employed at the Greenville County Medical Examiner's Office, and I'm one of the medical examiners there.
And what kinds of things are part of your duties as a medical examiner with the Sheriff's Office?
As a medical examiner, I perform autopsies on deceased individuals to determine the cause and manner of death.
Could you talk a little bit about your education and background that led you into taking this role?
Sure. So I did my undergrad at the George Washington University, where I received a degree in biological sciences. Following that, I did a 4 years of medical school at the Medical University of the Americas. Following medical school, I did 4 years of residency training in anatomic and clinical pathology at the University of Knoxville, the University of Tennessee Medical Center in Knoxville, Tennessee. Following residency, I did 1 year of fellowship training in forensic pathology at the Milwaukee County Medical Examiner's Office in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
And how long have you been a medical examiner for the Sheriff's Office?
I started working here in August of 2021, so about 4 years now.
Okay. So you were in that role in October of 2021?
Yes.
And to get in that role in October of 2021, you spoke to your education, but did you undergo specialized training specifically for the purpose of conducting autopsies?
Yes, so after I completed my residency training, I took a qualifying examination and became board certified in anatomic pathology. Then after I finished my fellowship training, I took another qualifying examination and became board certified in forensic pathology.
And approximately how many autopsies have you conducted since starting your role with the Sheriff's Office?
I have done approximately 1,500 autopsies.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would move to qualify Dr. Rose as an expert in forensic pathology.
No objection.
All right, without objection. He is qualified as an expert. Ladies and gentlemen, a person, as I've said with other experts, normally a person cannot give opinion testimony, and when a person testifies, they must testify as to what they either saw, or they heard, or they sensed by smell. However, there is an exception when someone is qualified because of education or experience, and they are permitted to give their opinion in certain areas if the court qualifies them this way, and this witness will be qualified in the area of forensic pathology to give an opinion, testimony in this area. However, that does not mean that you must accept the opinion, but it is evidence for you to use in any way you see fit and give it the weight and credibility that you believe is appropriate. Continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. So, Dr. Rose, could you go through with the jury generally what your process is when you're conducting an autopsy from the start of your analysis to going through the steps that you take?
Sure. So first off, an autopsy is a specialized procedure that we perform on deceased individuals, again, to determine the cause and manner of death. And an autopsy consists basically of two parts, an external examination and an internal examination. So first we start with the external examination, which consists of examining the body as is presented to us. So as I'm examining the whole body, I'm taking notes through note-taking and photographs and documenting any clothing that's on the body, any personal effects on the body, any medical intervention that may be on the body, just the general characteristics of the individual, such as their hair color, their eye color, their weight, etc. And then also I'm also looking for any signs of disease or injury. So once that initial examination is complete, then I will remove all that clothing, all the personal effects, all the medical examination. I will clean the body, and then I will re-examine the body again, the full body, looking again for any signs of disease or injury. So that's the external examination. So once that is complete, I move on to the internal examination. And that means opening up the body, taking out all of the organs, and then looking at each organ individually, again, looking for any signs of disease or injury.
And were you tasked with conducting the autopsy on Christina Parcell for this case?
Yes, I was.
And in going through the steps that you just went through, in the external and internal examination, are you documenting your findings as you're going through each of those?
Yes, I'm documenting what findings through notes and photographs.
Do you assign each case a unique number to know what you're referencing?
Yes, I do.
For hindsight?
Mm-hmm.
So, also in conducting your autopsy, do you put together a diagram or a picture representation of your findings of injuries?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Speaking generally as to your external examination of Ms. Parcell, well, let's back up before that. Before you begin your autopsy, are you apprised of general circumstances and the nature of how an individual was found and brought to you before you conduct your autopsy to give you some directive of where to go from there?
Yes, so in this particular case, when I arrived to work, I was made aware of Ms. Parcell.
I would object as to hearsay if she's going to talk about a statement someone else told her.
I can rephrase, Your Honor.
Yeah. Sustain the objection.
Just generally,
Yes,
you're apprised of those
Yes,
circumstances?
I am.
So, speaking to your external examination of Ms. Parcell, what jumped out at you as you were going through there to mark of significance in your report and in your findings?
So I found that there were 35 sharp force injuries to Ms. Parcell.
Okay. Did you reflect those in your diagram that you put together for purposes of recording what you found?
Yes, I did.
I'm going to show you what's marked as State's Exhibit 192. I'm going to show you States 192.
Yes.
Is that the diagram that you put together?
Yes, this is the diagram I created.
Okay. Your Honor, this time the State moves into evidence. States 192.
No objection.
Objection number 192 comes from the record.
Dr. Rose, speaking to how you received the body before you start conducting your autopsy, are there protections put in place to preserve what might potentially be collected as evidence at the time of the autopsy and maybe even down the road?
Sure. So the body is placed in a body bag and sealed, preventing from anyone getting into the bag. Also, handbags are also placed around both of the hands to preserve any evidence that may be present.
Okay. But otherwise, the body is brought to you as is from the time it's found?
Yes.
That's important to preserve for any findings that you may make or anyone afterwards, is that
Yes.
right? And while you're conducting this autopsy, is there a forensic technician with the Sheriff's Office with you to collect evidence for purposes of the case?
Yes, there was one forensic technician present during the autopsy of Ms. Parcell.
Okay. I want to go through with you some findings that you made on State's Exhibit 192 as it related to Ms. Parcell. I'm going to start. This first page here. Starting with the top. You identified Ms. Parcell on this document?
Yes.
And then you make a note there. Could you explain to the jury what the difference is between a stab wound and an incised wound?
Sure. So first I'll just say what a sharp force injury is. So a sharp force injury is an injury caused by a pointed or sharp-edged object. Examples of this include a knife, which is the most common object that we see during our work, but it also may include other objects such as scissors, a fork, screwdriver, basically anything that has a sharp or pointed edge. So then we sharp force injuries. If it's a knife, then we have either a stab wound or an incised wound. And now a stab wound is a wound that is deeper than than its length on the skin, and an incised wound is a wound that is its length is longer on the skin than it is deeper. And then so here in this diagram, the shaded oval areas indicate the stab wounds, and the partially shaded areas indicate the incised wounds.
So would it be fair to say, when you say stab wound, that's what most people, when they commonplace think of the word stab, is a stab wound. And an incised wound is more of, say, a slice?
Yes.
And approximately how many sharp force wounds were located on Ms. Parcell's body as it relates to her torso and her arms? So
To her torso and her arms, there were a total of 9 sharp force injuries, and I can quickly just go through
Sure.
each of them. So starting with the stab wounds, Ms. Parcell had 1 stab wound to the top of her shoulder and 1 stab wound to the left side of her upper chest. Both of these wounds went through the skin and penetrated the underlining soft tissue. Then you have another stab wound to the left breast. This wound went through the skin, the underlining soft tissue, and penetrated the chest cavity and superficially penetrated the left lung. Then we have the 4th stab wound, which is to the left side of the mid-back. This wound went through the skin, the underlining soft tissue, and just penetrated the chest cavity without injuring the left lung. So those are all the stab wounds, and then we have, well, on this one you can't see all of the incised wounds, but you have 4 inside. Yeah, here we go. So here you see 5 incised wounds. So you have 2 incised wounds to the right upper arm, 1 incised wound to the posterior right forearm, 1 incised wound to the left upper arm, and then 1 incised wound to the posterior left pinky.
I'm going to show you the second page here. Dr. Rose, as to Ms. Parcell's head and neck, how many sharp force injuries were identified in those areas?
So Ms. Parcell had a total of 26 sharp force injuries. So she had 7 stab wounds and 19 incised wounds. And I can quickly go through all of those too if you would like. Starting with the incised wounds, so she had, like, as I said, a total of 19 incised wounds to various locations to her scalp, to the right ear, the areas in front of the ear, the areas behind the ear, both cheeks, and to the right side of the interior neck. And again, these wounds just went through the skin and superficially penetrated the underlining soft tissue. Now we have 7 stab wounds to the neck area. We have 1 stab wound to the left side of the posterior neck, and that wound just went through the skin and the deep underlining soft tissue. And then we have a total of 6 stab wounds to the right side of the neck, and these wounds went through the skin, the underlining soft tissue and musculature of the neck, and then perforated 2 major blood vessels that supply blood to and from the head. The right internal carotid artery and the right internal jugular vein.
As to the injuries that affected the carotid and jugular arteries, could those be fatal once serrated?
Yes, those would have caused significant amount of bleeding.
And your findings specific to these areas and the locations of the wounds. Are there more wounds on the left or the right side of Ms. Parcell's head and neck?
Majority of the wounds are concentrated to her right side.
And speaking to how the location of these wounds and the number in significant areas, pointing you to the stab wounds on the right side of Ms. Parcell's neck here, what would you say was, and when you're determining the cause and the manner of Ms. Parcell's death, which wounds brought the most attention to you? Which were the most significant in your analysis of making that determination?
The most significant stab wounds were the ones to the right side of the neck. The group of 6, well, 5, and then 1 you can't see, but it's on the kind of, if you move the sheet a little bit down, you will see 1 stab wounds to the right side. So the group of those 6, the 6 stab wounds are the most significant ones.
Dr. Rose, could you explain to the jury what blunt force trauma is?
So blunt force trauma is just injury to the body that's caused from the body impacting an object or the body impacting an object.
Did you observe findings of blunt force trauma as it relates to Ms. Parcell?
Yes, I did.
What were your significant findings there?
So Ms. Parcell had contusions or bruises to the left side of her face, her anterior neck, and 1 contusion to her left knee. She also had tiny abrasions or scrapes to her right cheek, her neck, and her left upper extremity. She also had 2 small lacerations or tears in the skin to the right side of her forehead and to her left eyebrow. Additionally, she also had hemorrhage within her scalp and hemorrhage within the left temporalis muscle, which is just a muscle that sits just underneath the left side of the scalp.
So, speaking to the findings of sharp force injuries with relation to Ms. Parcell, are you able to make any substantial findings as to the type of object used or specifics related to that object?
So the appearance of all of the sharp force injuries are consistent with a knife being used.
Okay. But past that, how specific can you get into making conclusions as to details of the knife, I suppose?
So just on the appearance of Ms. Parcell's wounds, I can't further characterize the type of knife.
And in conducting your autopsy, you didn't find any evidence that would aid you in further making a conclusion towards that effect?
No.
Is toxicology part of the autopsy process?
Yes, it is.
What is toxicology for the juries?
So during the autopsy procedure, I may take samples. For example, I may take blood to run toxicology just to see if there's any drugs in her system that may have contributed to the individual's death.
Were there any were any findings on the end of toxicology significant in your determination of finding cause and manner of death?
No.
Were there any findings as related to illicit drugs in Ms. Parcell's system?
No.
Finally, Dr. Rose, what was your conclusion as to the cause and manner of Ms. Parcell's death?
So the cause of death was multiple sharp force injuries, and the manner of death was homicide.
Dr. Rose, just bringing your attention back quickly to the object that might have been used to cause these sharp force injuries. Did you make any findings as it related to what happened in the process of these injuries being inflicted as it relates to that object, the tip being broke off, or remains of the knife found in her system, or differences in the wounds to that effect?
Can you repeat the question?
So in trying to make a finding or looking for findings as it relates to the object that may have been used in inflicting these wounds, Were you able to find any evidence of differences in the wounds, that a different object might have been used or something happened to the object in the course of inflicting these injuries?
So at the time of the autopsy, I did not find any sharp object that may have remained inside or on the body. And then based on the appearances of the wounds, it is most consistent with the knife being used. And that is all that I can say.
I have no further questions for you. Thank you.
May I please report? Dr. Rose, when did you start? You testified you started in August of 2021.
Correct.
Do you remember what day in August of 2021?
I do not.
Okay, that's okay. You conducted this autopsy on October the 14th of 2021?
That is correct.
So at the time you conducted this autopsy, you had been on the job just about 2 months, right?
Correct.
Okay. You were asked about toxicology. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And isn't it true that the toxicology showed that Christina Parcell had amphetamine in her system? Isn't that true?
Correct.
And isn't that a controlled substance?
Yes, it's a stimulant, yes.
Yeah. Isn't it true? You talked about the sharp force injuries that you discovered during the autopsy, and isn't it true you talked about incised injuries versus stab wounds, right?
Yes.
And isn't it true that in your report you used the word superficial or the adjective superficial prior to many of the times you referenced incised injuries? Isn't that true?
Yes.
All right. And you testified that these incised injuries were longer, much longer than they are deeper. Is that
Yes.
correct? And in fact, in your autopsy report, isn't it true that you didn't even calculate whatever the depth was of the incised injuries?
I mean, it's very difficult because they are so superficial.
So superficial.
Yes.
Right. And isn't it true that the vast majority of the what you call the sharp force injuries you discovered were incised wounds? Isn't that true?
That is true.
And in other words, those are superficial injuries, according to your own words. Isn't that true?
Yes.
Isn't it true that you calculated that Christina Parcell weighed 163 pounds? Is that right?
I believe that is correct, yes.
And she was wearing acrylic fingernails. Is that right?
That is correct.
What color were they?
Red. Let me double check. Yes, they were red. Correct.
One second. Thank you, Dr. Rose. None further. Can you redirect?
Yes, Your Honor, briefly. Dr. Rose, speaking specifically to the amphetamines that Mr. Moorman brought up, were the amphetamine findings in the toxicology consistent with a prescribed amount?
Yes.
And amphetamines, is that the active chemical in, say, Adderall?
Yes.
and he spoke a lot as to the incise wounds and stab wounds found on Miss Parcell. Just as to the right side of her neck, how many stab wounds were there?
There were 6 stab wounds to the right side of the neck.
Thank you, Dr. Rose. I have nothing further for you.
Just briefly, and Dr. Rose, he asked you about the quantities being consistent with prescriptions. Isn't it also true that it's possible to get illicit drugs in the same quantities as prescription drugs? Is that true?
Sure.
Okay. Nothing else.
Nothing to say.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, I think they might be going to break, but let me see. Yeah, they are. This will be our last skipping ahead, and then we'll have been caught up with the live. But yeah, I was just going to say, I didn't want to like type out too much in the chat, but I was going to say that the more and more I read about Christina and Bradley, I mean, they're both just really bad people. And the different lawsuits of people stepping forward and, you know, saying that they're a victim of them, it so far all has been Christine's friend and then her friend's child. So she basically is being all nice and buddy-buddy with these other women, but it's really to get a hold and have access to their daughter. And it's just obviously disgusting and horrible. And yes, they obviously are also fighting to keep everything out if they're able to. But I feel like that's really important to know. I still don't think it will come out, but it definitely leaves a bad taste in my mouth. I understand she was a victim and she shouldn't have been murdered, but I don't feel so bad knowing all this other information that they've been doing to children. Not good. All right, let's see who's up next. Oh, and one more thing. She has a daughter with her ex, and once again, I think Zachary killed her because he was best friends with her ex. But if anything like that came out during trial, I could see easily that the defense attorney could be like, you know, she shouldn't have been able to have her daughter. She was a bad person doing this stuff and shouldn't have had contact with the mom and all this stuff. But we'll just see what happens and what actually comes out.
Thank you. Please state your name for the record. Hannah Burbage.
Ms. Burbage, with whom are you employed?
The Greenville County Department of Public Safety in the Forensic DNA Lab.
And what do you do in the forensic DNA lab?
I'm a DNA analyst.
And what is a DNA analyst?
So a DNA analyst, we examine items of evidence for profiles and then compare them to any references provided.
Can you give us a little bit of your background and employment history and education?
I have a bachelor's in forensic science from Western Carolina University, and I have been employed here about 4.5 years.
And can you tell this jury more specifically what are your duties and roles in the forensic DNA lab?
So before I became a DNA analyst, I started out as their serologist. So serology is basically examining items of evidence for suspected body fluids, such as blood, semen, and saliva, as well as we can kind of find out who might have worn an item or handled an item, and then taking samples forward for DNA analysis. And then once those samples go forward for DNA analysis, the analyst will perform analysis, get the profiles, compare them, and then we write up reports.
Okay. And where is all of this conducted?
At the DNA lab?
And is the DNA lab here in Greenville?
Yes.
All right. And how long has the DNA lab been in existence?
I believe it was opened in 2011.
And so, when you get a sample that you want to be tested, tell this jury how that process works.
So an investigator has to request the DNA to be done. So they fill out a form and what evidence they would like processed. I then review any documentation for that particular case, such as incident reports, crime scene reports, as well as the DNA request and any evidence collected. Once I kind of have an idea of what evidence needs to be processed and what needs to be done on those items. So am I looking for suspected body fluids, or am I processing it in a different way? Then I will request evidence from our property and evidence section, which is the location that stores all evidence from crime scenes. They will then get the evidence together that I need. I will go to that location there at the law enforcement center, pick up the evidence from them, and bring it back to the DNA lab, which is a secure facility and accessed by key card only. Before processing, I wear personal protective equipment, so a lab coat, gloves, face mask. I clean my workbench as well as any tools I'm going to be using with 10% bleach. I process one item at a time, and I always start with evidence items before processing reference items.
And have you ever been qualified as an expert in serology before?
Yes.
How many times?
I believe about 6.
Your Honor, the state moves to qualify Hannah Burbridge as an expert in serology.
No objection.
No objection. Ladies and gentlemen, as I've said with other expert witnesses, this particular witness will be qualified in the area of serology to give an opinion in that area. However, that does not mean that you must accept the opinion, but it is evidence for you to use in any way you see fit and give it the weight and credibility that you believe is appropriate.
Ms. Burbridge, I'm going to ask you, were you asked to assist in the performances of various DNA analysis in the case of Zachary Hughes?
So I only performed serology for this case. I did not do any DNA analysis.
Okay. Did you perform, but you did perform serology in this particular case?
Yes.
Okay. And so how did you, what was the first, how did you know to perform serology in this particular case?
The investigator requested DNA evidence to be processed.
Okay. And how was that request made?
Through a form, a DNA analysis request form.
And how do you receive that form?
So we have a digital system that keeps track of all evidence that's in property and evidence that I have access to, and there's a staging location for evidence that's been requested for DNA, and I review those requests through that, and that's how I'm notified, or investigators can request to talk to us about cases.
And when you get this request for whatever particular item of DNA, what do you do?
So, as I said before, I review all documentation, including the incident report, crime scene reports, as well as the evidence list, to kind of get an understanding of the case and what evidence is requested and how I would process the evidence that's requested.
And then do you physically go down to property and evidence and obtain that evidence, obtain it?
Yes.
And then what do you do with it once it's in your possession?
It's brought back to the DNA lab, which, as I said before, is a secure location.
I'm going to show you what's marked as State's Exhibits 96 and 97. Ask if you recognize these.
Yes.
And on here, on State's 97, is that your initials right there?
Yes.
And did you go to property and evidence and obtain these particular pieces of evidence?
Yes.
And what are they?
Case item number KF-AU1 became our item number 10, which is a sealed package containing buccal swab from Christina Parcell.
Okay, and so you said your item number 10. Explain to the jury how that happens.
So whenever we receive evidence, we label them just to kind of keep track in our system of each item.
Okay. And so when you had the request to get the DNA and you went down to property and evidence, how did you do that?
So we drive to Property and Evidence, which is located at the Law Enforcement Center, and they will provide me with the evidence. It's usually scanned into my custody through our digital barcoding system, which is a digital chain of custody.
And once you receive the evidence, do you inspect it?
Once I am back at the lab and ready to begin processing the evidence, I will be inspecting it.
And what are you inspecting it for?
To ensure that it's the correct items as well as everything is sealed and labeled properly.
Did you inspect these two particular items as well?
Yes.
And was there anything significant that you saw about whether they had been tampered with or not?
No.
Did you inspect them to see if they were properly sealed?
Yes.
And was there any issue that you noted on any reports regarding those samples?
I have no notes regarding any issues with the evidence.
If there was something that brought to your attention, would you note that?
Yes, I would document it as well as notify my supervisor immediately.
And would you be able to use it in testing if there was an issue or a contamination or an improper sealing?
Typically, we would not process anything that has not been sealed.
And were these two items sealed properly?
Yes.
Let's show you what's marked as State's Exhibit 11. Ask you if you recognize that.
Yes.
All right. And is that your initials on there?
Yes.
And would that be when you retrieved it from Property and Evidence?
So typically when I label evidence, that is the day that I'm actually processing it. When I initially am going to open the evidence, I will label it with our lab number, our unique item number, my initials, and the date that I'm processing it.
And did you retrieve this evidence from Property and Evidence
Yes.
here at Greenville?
Yes.
And when you retrieved it, did you notice any improper sealing or tampering with the item?
No.
And if you had, would you have put it in your notes?
Yes.
Let me show you State's Exhibit 100. Let me show you State's Exhibit 100. You can open that up. And before I ask you that, on the prior exhibit, did you make it a new DNA number, or a new DNA item?
Yes. So originally, case item number BW-A became our item number 11, which was a sealed package containing buccal swab from Michael Manigault.
All right, now I'm showing you State's Exhibit 100.
Okay. Case item number KF-N1 became our item number 12, a sealed package containing buccal swab from Zachary Hughes. This is the one that I processed.
Okay, so that would be what item number?
Originally, case item KF-N1 became our item 12. This is a second buccal swab, was labeled as a different item number.
What item number was that?
KF-N2.
Now, did you retrieve this from property and evidence?
Yes.
And when you retrieved it, how did you find it?
It was a sealed package containing buccal swab from Zachary Hughes.
Did you notice that had it been tampered with?
No.
Had there been any issue with the sealing that you noticed?
No.
So in your inspection, was it properly sealed?
Yes.
And where did you take the sample?
At the DNA lab.
I'll show you States Exhibit 94 and 95. Ask if you recognize these.
Yes.
And what are these?
So case item number KF-AU9 became our item 2, which was a sealed package containing fingernail clippings from victim's right hand. And then case item number KF-AU10 became our number item 3, which was a sealed package containing fingernail clippings from victim's left hand.
Did you collect this from the Greenville County Property and Evidence?
Yes.
And do you recall how, when you obtained these items, what condition they were in?
They were sealed.
Any issues with them being marked, open, contaminated, or anything like that?
No.
I'm going to show you States Exhibits 98 and 99. Show you States Exhibit 98 and 99. What are those?
Excuse me. Case item number KF-32A became our item number 5, and it is a sealed package containing swab from right handle brake of black Kona bicycle. And then case item KF-32B became our item number 6, a sealed package containing swab from left handle brake of black Kona bicycle.
And did you retrieve those from the Greenville County Property and Evidence here in Greenville?
Yes.
And did you notice any issues when you received it from E&E?
No.
Was there any tampering with these items?
They were sealed.
They were sealed properly?
Yes.
All right. So once you get these items back to the DNA lab, what do you do with them?
So they are stored until I'm ready to begin processing. And then, as I said before, once I am ready to begin processing, I'll put on my PPE, clean my work area, and then open one item at a time for processing. Once I am done taking either testing or taking samples from that item, I'll seal it back up and then move on to the next item. I work all evidence items first before references. Any samples that I take are given their own unique item number and barcode number to maintain chain of custody, and then those items are stored in the freezer until the DNA analyst is ready to begin processing.
Okay, so I'm going to refer you to your reference number 2A and 3A, clippings of right hand, which is 2A. What did you, testing did you perform on those? Or not testing, what, the right word, did you take any swabs of it?
Yes, so for item 2, the fingernail clippings from the victim's right hand, observation revealed 4 pink fake nails. A swab of the tips of the fingernail clippings were taken for DNA analysis as item 2A. So the actual nails, I swabbed the tips of them, and then those swabs became item 2A, which were forwarded for DNA analysis.
And did you do that with your item 3A, the left hand?
Yes, so item 3, the fingernail clippings from the victim's left hand, observation revealed 5 pink fake nails, and a swab of the tips of the fingernail clippings were taken for DNA analysis as item 3A.
So tell this jury, so when you get these items out, how are you dressed in order to avoid contamination? Literally, what do you do?
I'm wearing a lab coat, a face mask, and gloves. I change my gloves frequently, as well as cleaning my surface area, any tools that I'm using, and I clean in between items and cases.
And then how do you swab these items?
So for certain items, we're going to take a wet swab. So it's a swab. It looks like a Q-tip, kind of like a long Q-tip, and we will lightly wet it with deionized water, and then proceed to actually swab the areas that I'm intending to swab. And this helps pick up any skin cells that might be present in that particular area.
And did you swab the your 2A clippings of the right hand of the victim?
That's what I created, the swabs, item 2A.
And then where do you place that swab?
They're placed in DNA Freezer 1, which is where the DNA analyst will then pick them up from.
And what about your items 5A and 6A, the handlebars of the bike, right and left side?
So item 5, the swab from the right handle brake of black Kona bicycle, since that was already a swab, I am just taking a portion of that. So I literally cut a portion of that swab, place that sample into a tube, and that gets labeled as item 5A and forwarded for DNA analysis. And then item 6, the swab from the left handle brake, I did the same thing. That gets taken a sample forward as item 6A.
And did you put that in a secure storage location?
Yes, those would have been stored in DNA Freezer 1 as well.
Now, in regards to your, what I'll call them knowns, which would be your 10A, 11A, and 12A, 10A being the victim's known, Michael Manigault's known being your 11A, and Zachary Hughes' being your known 12A. How do you process the knowns?
So as I said before, the knowns are processed last because they're reference items. They're swabs. Buccal swabs are swabs from the inside of your cheek. So they're direct DNA references taken from that specific person, and that's what's used to compare to evidence items. So I would process them the same way by opening one at a time. Since it's a swab, I'm taking a portion of that swab, putting it in a tube, and labeling that as its own unique item number. So for item 10, buccal swab from Christina Parcell, a sample was taken for DNA analysis as item 10A. Item 11, a buccal swab from Michael Manigault, a sample was taken for DNA analysis as item 11A. And buccal swab from Zachary Hughes, which was originally item 12, a sample was taken for DNA analysis as item 12A. And then those would have been stored in the freezer as well.
So how do you take a sample?
I'm literally cutting the swab with scissors, clean scissors.
Now, is this done at a different time than the sort of the suspect, the unknown swabs?
Yes, the evidence items I'm processing first, and then reference items are processed last, so they're separated by time and space from the evidence items.
How much time and space?
Typically, it could be a few minutes to an hour. It just depends on when I'm actually processing the evidence.
And then in between, are y'all cleaning?
Yes, I clean in between each item.
Your Honor, state moves 96 and 97 in, 111, 100, 95, 94, 99, and 98.
Your Honor, I object to the introduction of all these exhibits pursuant to Rule 901. The state has failed to adequately establish a chain of custody, failed to authenticate it. That would be our objection.
Your objection is noted for the record, overruled, consistent with State v. Hatcher, Trap, and other cases. Anything from the state?
Yes, Your Honor. We feel the chain under those cases has been met. All of the swabs were taken by witnesses that have already testified. They all testified they put it into property and evidence. Ms. Burbage has testified that she received it from property evidence in a good condition, non-contaminated condition, that she could use and be able to analyze.
And I think the state can. But your objection is noted for the record.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right.
Now, Ms. Burbage, who actually did the DNA testing in this?
Tim Knopfseeker.
All right. And would he have handled other items? Would he have gone and gotten other items from property and evidence?
I would have to refer to the chain of custody. Occasionally, I will pick up additional items later on for additional testing, but I don't actually open them and take samples. For instance, if reference items are submitted later on, I may pick them up from property and evidence with my other evidence, but the analyst can cut it and take it forward for analysis on their own, and the chain of custody would reflect this.
Do you recall taking any other pieces of evidence from property and evidence to the DNA lab?
I have about almost 30 items that I have processed for this case.
Can you check your notes? And did you take references to John Mello, Brad Post, and Alex Fields?
I did not process those.
So you didn't cut the little ends and put it and have it ready for DNA on those three?
No.
Your Honor, just for clarifications, I've got states 96, 97, 111, 100, 95, 94, 98, and 99 into evidence.
Just to make sure they've already been.
And your objections? Yeah.
Yeah, and those objections have been brought. And just to be clear, Your Honor, I'm sorry. So Mr. Wilkins referenced those exhibits; those are already in evidence.
That's correct.
I
I'm just crossing my T's, double checking. Those are the ones we discussed and that we're putting it out.
For the record, make sure it is absolutely clear, 96, 97, 111, 100, 94, 95, 98, and 99 are all into evidence. And your objections noted.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right. And I've already referenced cases.
That's all the state has, Your Honor.
Any cross?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Your Honor, the state's calls Tim Nafziger.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name for the record.
Timothy Nafziger, Jr.
Mr. Nafziger, who are you employed?
I work for the Greenville County Department of Public Safety in the Forensic DNA Lab.
And what do you do for the forensic DNA?
I'm the DNA technical leader.
And what does that mean?
So I oversee the policies and procedures of the lab. I perform validations, and I also am a DNA analyst and work casework as well.
Are you in charge?
Yes, sir.
So what is, do you get a special title or anything?
DNA technical leader, that's what it is.
So as the DNA technical leader, what are your main job duties?
So like I said, I oversee the policies and procedures of the lab. I perform validations. I oversee casework. I do casework myself.
How long have you been doing that?
I've been in that position about a year and a half.
And how long have you worked at the lab?
I've worked at the lab for about 11 and a half years.
Before that, were you into the DNA world?
This is my first job in forensic DNA.
Tell us a little bit about your background and history.
So I have a bachelor's degree in biological sciences from Clemson University, a master's degree in entomology from Auburn University. And when I was employed here, I started as a serologist, and I was trained in all the methods that we use in the lab. I also then was trained in DNA analysis methods, became a DNA analyst, and then eventually was promoted to DNA technical leader.
And tell us a little bit about the training that you go through.
So we do a system where we have mock evidence that we put, mock samples. There's a written exam. There are we do mock cases, and then we do a competency exam as well. Also, twice a year, we do proficiency testing, which are cases that are provided to us from an outside company that we don't know the answers to. We have to test them, give them back our answers, and they make sure we got the right answers.
About how many DNA samples have you tested?
From including my serology, I've worked several thousand items of evidence over my career.
And tell us a little bit about the lab. When was it established, and how did that happen?
So the lab first began working cases in 2011.
And to be established as a DNA lab, you have to get certified?
Yes, so we're an accredited lab. We're accredited through an organization called ANAB. We're under the standards, the ISO 17025 standards, and the FBI's quality assurance standards.
And are y'all reaccredited every year?
We undergo some level of an audit every year. Our full reaccreditation audits are every 4 years.
And are y'all currently accredited?
We are.
Have you always been accredited?
Yes.
And are there, we'll call them spot checks on where folks come in and kind of make sure you're doing everything correctly?
That's correct. We have, when we undergo an audit, these are outside people who come in and look at all our stuff. They look at our policies or procedures. They observe people working in the lab. They take a representative sample of cases and look through all our case files, our methods, our results to see if they can find any issues while comparing it with the standards that we have to follow.
And have y'all always got a good grade on all that?
Yes, we've passed every audit.
Now, did you do any prep work in this particular case?
With any case like this, typically we're having to look into the case details to determine what the best avenue of testing the evidence is, depending on the type of evidence, what we're looking for in a case.
Did you retrieve any items from the property and evidence for processing?
Most of the items I tested were prepared by our serologists in the lab. I did pick up 3 references.
All right. I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 101 and ask if you recognize this.
Yes.
What is this?
This is a buccal swab from John Mello.
And how did you obtain this item?
I would have received it from our property and evidence department.
And sort of the same way that Ms. Burbridge just testified to?
That's right.
And when you obtained this item, how did it appear to you?
So whenever I pick up evidence items, I check the packaging, make sure everything is properly sealed and labeled, and it was.
Was there any tampering or any kind of cuts on the items before
No.
you took it back? And if there was, would you have noticed that?
I would have.
And would you have documented that?
I would have.
And would you have tested it otherwise?
Most likely not.
And what is this? What is John Mello's swab? Your reference number now?
So I gave it, our item number is item 27.
27. I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 10. It's already been admitted into evidence. Just get you to identify that.
Yes, this is a sealed package containing buccal swab from Bradley Post. This is this one you've handed me is DHE1. The one I tested was you handed me DH-E2. The one I tested was DH-E1.
Please support, Your Honor. One of them got admitted into evidence.
We can take a quick break.
Here. There it is, Your Honor. Yeah, stuck over here. I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 11.
Yes, I recognize this. This is our item 25, sealed package containing buccal swab from Post Bradley.
And did you collect this piece?
I obtained it at,
retrieve it.
I got it from our property and evidence department.
And when you retrieved it, did you inspect it?
Yes, I did.
And was it properly sealed?
It was.
And if it wasn't properly sealed, would you have noticed that?
Yes, I would have.
And would you have noted that in your documents?
I would have.
And would you have tested it?
No.
And finally, State's Exhibit 181. You recognize this?
Yes, I do.
And what is that?
So this is a sealed package containing buccal swabs from Alex Fields. case item number JDS1.
And did you retrieve that from property and evidence?
I did.
And was it properly sealed?
Yes, it was.
Our state moves items 11, 181, and 101.
Your Honor, I would object to citing 901 related property exams changes.
Your objection is noted for the record. I overrule and consistent with the cases of Hatcher and the other cases which I've mentioned earlier, 11, 181, and 101.
You got Exhibit 11, correct?
11, 181, and 101
Thank you.
are admitted into evidence.
All right, Mr. Nafsinger, I don't think I've moved to qualify you as an expert yet. Your Honor, I move to qualify Mr. Nafsinger as an expert.
Your man inquires what the field is.
In DNA analysis.
No objection.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, as I've said with other experts, this witness will be qualified to testify in the area of DNA analysis, and he can give his opinion in that area. However, it does not mean that you must accept the opinion, but it is an evidence for you to consider and use in any way you see fit, and give it the weight and credibility that you feel is appropriate. You can consider it.
So, Mr. Nafsinger, tell us how you analyzed the items that you just referenced and the ones that in general, and that Ms. Burbidge referenced as well.
So there's 4 basic steps to DNA analysis. So first is called extraction. We have to basically break the cells open and get the DNA out of the cells. And then we have to do a process called quantification, which is where we simply find out how much DNA is present in the sample. Then we do a process called amplification, which is where we make lots of copies of specific areas of DNA. And then we put those copies onto our genetic analyzer, which then produces a DNA profile. Then we have to interpret the DNA profile. DNA is a comparison science. The only way we can know whose DNA is present on an evidence item is if we have a known sample, such as a buccal swab, to compare to it.
Now, Ms. Burbidge testified about taking clippings and swabs. Are those the items that you tested?
Yes, they are.
All right, and so, and I'm just going to go over, tell this jury the knowns that you tested in your reference item.
So I did a total of 6 reference items. Item 10A was a sample of buccal swab from Christina Parcell. Item 11A was sample of buccal swab from Michael Manigault. Item 12A was sample of buccal swab from Zachary Hughes. Item 25 was a sealed package containing buccal swab from Bradley Post. Item 26 was a sealed package containing buccal swabs from Alex Fields. And item 27 was a sealed package containing buccal swab from John Mello.
All right, so tell us, what is a reference sample?
So a reference sample is just a known sample of somebody's DNA. That's so that we can compare the profile that we get from that reference sample to whatever we find on the evidence.
And then those reference numbers that I'm referring to, are those just the numbers that you refer to in your report?
That's right.
And then you generate a report describing your findings?
That's right.
And then what do you call the items that you're trying to see if there's DNA matching to them?
So we'll call those questioned items because we don't know what we're going to find on them when we go to test them.
All right. And so in this case, what question items did you compare to? Compare the reference items to?
Well, I did quite a few,
yeah.
a lot of them.
Okay, let's talk about it. So about how many items do you think that you tested in this particular case?
Let me check my report.
And you can give an estimation.
More than 20, it looks like.
And so I'm going to refer you to your reference items 2A and, 5A and 6A. Can you tell the jury what those items are?
So item 5A is sample of swab from right handle brake of black Kona bicycle. And item 6A is sample of swab from left handle brake of black Kona bicycle.
Okay. And so just give another general description. In the lab, you've got, and this is 5A and 6A, the swabs of the black Kona bicycle. It is just a clipping of that swab that you're using.
That's correct.
And that is the swab that that Hannah Burbage process or prepared for you.
That's correct.
All right, and where did you get that swab from?
I got it from DNA Freezer 1 in the DNA lab.
Okay. And is that a secure location?
It is. The entire DNA lab is secure with only key card access, only accessible by the people who work there, and there's an alarm system. So.
And what measures do you instill to make sure that there's no cross-contamination from the reference samples?
So when I'm doing my extractions, the questioned items are extracted at a separate time and space than the known samples. So when I'm handling the questioned items, I have not handled any of the reference items yet. And so anytime I'm doing my processes manually, I'm only having one tube open at a time, and I'm only working question items, and then later I work the reference items. Later on, some of our processes involve robotics, and all our robotics have passed extensive validation tests that have also been audited when we get audited. And a part of those validation processes are contamination assessments, where we basically set it up to try to force it to contaminate and set up where we would very easily see if it did, and they've always passed.
And so do y'all have sort of safety measurements in place inside the lab to make sure there's no contamination or other issues arising out of the testing?
Yes, so in addition to those precautions, I'm obviously wearing protective equipment. So I've got a mask, gloves, a lab coat, change my gloves frequently. We also work with controls. So with every extraction batch, I have what's basically called a reagent blank, which is just an empty tube that I do everything to it, the same thing I'm doing to all the other samples, and I run it just like all the other samples to see if anything shows up in there, because we would see it if some DNA is being transferred between samples.
And do y'all have a peer review system?
We do.
And how does that work?
So we do 2 reviews. We have a technical review and an administrative review, and the main point of the review is another analyst who's fully qualified to do the same processes that I did goes through and looks at all of my data, essentially reinterprets everything, makes sure they agree with all my conclusions, that they don't find any issues with what I did, and no report is released until it passes review.
So in reference to 5A handlebar, right handlebar Kona bike, in reference to 6A left handlebar of the Kona bike, did you compare that swab to your knowns in this particular case?
I did.
And what was your conclusions of that?
So for item 5A, which was a sample of swab from right handle brake of black Kona bicycle, my findings were the DNA obtained from item 5A is a mixture of a major male individual and at least one trace contributor. The major contributor matches the DNA of Zachary Hughes. A match between the DNA result of item 5A and the DNA of Zachary Hughes is approximately 2 septillion times more likely than a coincidental match to a random unrelated individual. Upon establishing Zachary Hughes as a contributor to this mixture based on the match statistics, Michael Manigault, Bradley Post, Alex Fields, and John Mello are excluded as contributors to the DNA obtained from item 5A. Due to limited data of the remaining alleles, there is no statistical support for an inclusion or exclusion between item 5A and Christina Parcell.
So what does that last part mean, inclusion or exclusion of Christina Parcell?
It basically means no conclusive determination can be made for this individual.
So now I'm going to refer you to your items 2A and 3A, 2A being the clippings of the right hand of Christina Parcell. Did you have the...
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I don't fit the question.
I was just going to ask him if he compared that to the known references.
So I had items 2A and 3A. 2A was a swab of tips of fingernail clippings from victim's right hand. Item 3A was swab of tips of fingernail clippings from victim's left hand. Item 3A, PCR procedures for autosomal DNA analysis were not performed on item 3A due to the presence of large amounts of total DNA compared to male-specific Y chromosomal DNA. That is a case, basically, when we do our quant, or when we see how much DNA is there, we can see how much, in situations like this, we can see how much female DNA is present versus how much male DNA is present. And if it's too little, the next processes won't show up the male contributor because there's just too much female DNA. It's kind of like trying to hear your phone ring in a rock concert. It just gets overwhelmed. So at that point, we stopped with that sample.
So you're referring to the clippings of the left hand?
That's correct.
Okay. And so, and for reference, the items that you're dealing with are literally swabs. They're very tiny.
That's right.
All right. And so, did you have the occasion to test the clippings from Christina Parcell's right hand, which is your reference item 2A, to the knowns?
Yes, I did. So for item 5A, or I'm sorry, for item 2A, swab of tips of fingernail clippings from victim's right hand. My findings were...
And I'm going to object pursuant to Rule 403. It's our position that says no affirmative value based on their inability to properly establish chain pursuant to 9.
Your objection is noted for the record.
Good again. So
And
did
just for the record, I find that Rule 403 is extremely probative and substantially outweighs any unfair prejudice. But your objection is noted on the record.
Thank you, Your Honor. So I'll refer you back to clippings of the right hand 2A.
Yes.
And compared to our known references there.
So the DNA obtained from item 2A is a mixture of at least two individuals, a major female and a minor male. Assuming Christina Parcell is the major contributor to this mixture based on this being an intimate sample, a match between the minor DNA result of item 2A and the DNA of Zachary Hughes is approximately 825 million times more likely than a coincidental match to a random unrelated individual. Michael Manigault, Bradley Post, Alex Fields, and John Mello are excluded as contributors to the DNA obtained from item 2A.
So did you just tell this jury that Zachary Hughes' DNA is 825 million times more likely than a coincidental match to a random unrelated individual located under Christina Parcell's fingernails?
So what that stat means is it's called a likelihood ratio. And basically we're looking at two hypotheses as an explanation for the evidence profile that we find in the sample. So for every comparison, and we compared all the people to it, for every comparison, the first hypothesis is that this person's DNA is the best explanation for what we found on the evidence. And the other hypothesis is that it's somebody else in the random unrelated population. And so we're able to do statistics on this. And so it's kind of like sort of a seesaw effect. So when you have, for example, I read an inconclusive one recently, that's where it's kind of balanced, like it's not really tilting one way or another. If it's an exclusion, it means it's tilting toward someone in the random population is the better hypothesis to explain the evidence. And when it tilts the other way, which it did in this case, that's giving strong support for the hypothesis that that person's DNA is the best explanation for the evidence.
So what is the lowest probability standard that you would be permitted to report?
Per our lab policy, the lowest we'll report is a match score of 1,000.
And this one was 825 million.
That's correct.
Please answer any questions, defense counsel.
All right, cross-examination.
Yeah, I don't have any questions.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Step down. Can I see counsel if you're with me?
All right, let me see. Yeah, they do go on their lunch break. So we have officially caught up. They are still on their lunch break. So that was good. That worked out perfectly, I feel like. I'm going to end up doing a part 2 later, so I don't leave this up and running for who knows how long and them not even being there. And I'll have to go and edit this one right now and have it say part 1, but you should definitely see the part 2 if you are on with me later. I'm also going to be doing, probably in a couple hours, introducing a new trial that's going to be happening. They had a preliminary hearing today, and I didn't know anything about it, but while this was going on, I was taking all these notes. It's going to be a very interesting trial. So if you're interested in that, definitely go to my live later when it's time for us to watch that preliminary hearing. So, all right. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in a little bit.